Alrighty, folks. Welcome to the Mushing Alaska's coverage of the 2024 Iditarod. Uh, we're kind of giving this live a test run, and we're doing our part one preview of the Iditarod. We're going to talk about a couple different things, mostly non-musher related. So we'll talk little bit about pre-race logistics, rules, route, weather, and a couple other fun things. But before we get into all that, my brother, it's good to see you, man. How you doing?
Pretty good. I slept all day, and you know, I just wondering how I got here. Uh, but no, I'm doing good, man. It's life's going to be pretty hectic for both you and me here, starting soon, and I can't complain. I'm. It's a really exciting time for me and for mushing and for Alaska, and and we're excited. Everybody, I think I'm just excited to get out there and see what happens. But right now, I'm excited to be hanging out with you, my brother. So yeah, thanks for all the work you've been doing getting this stuff together. My name is right underneath me. There it is. That's my name, Sean. It's pretty cool. That's how you spell it too. Fun
Hell
fact.
yeah, man. Let's go, man. I'm just sitting here thinking of something that you were telling me earlier today. So you mentioned that you were chatting with Mark Nordman, and you were talking about, yeah, I'm getting ready to do some work with the Iditarod Insider, and he was like, oh man, that's gonna be even worse or worse time or hard time than running the actual race.
Yeah, not what you want to hear. I've heard that one other time when I talked to Wade, and he was like, "Oh, you're going to Fish Bristol Bay?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." And he was like, "Dude, gonna make the Iditarod seem easy." And I was like, "Wait, what?" So I'm scared. I'm scared to see what. I mean, he was right. I don't know. I don't think it made the Iditarod seem easy, but it was definitely comparable in a lot of ways. So I'm interested to see. I think the sleep deprivation aspect, because you're just trying to catch like every team coming into these checkpoints, and there's 38 teams, and they're going to be all spread out, and maybe there'll be like a 2 hour gap between teams coming in, so you got to edit stuff in those 2 hours, or so it's gonna be interesting to see, man. I know very little, and I'm just signing up to be available and ready to do whatever, whenever, all the time with a good attitude. So ready.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think you definitely jumped at this opportunity, right? But I don't think you fully know what you're getting yourself into. And well, honestly, man, it's gonna be fun. And after the race is done and you and I connect, I think it'll be really awesome just to do like a post race recap, and not just of the race, but of your experience. You're gonna be seeing stuff that the average person doesn't. So I'll be super excited and just eager to hear the stories. I mean, hopefully it works out to where you and I are able to at least communicate while you're out there on the trail. But in my mind, I'm not having that expectation. And in that way, it's like if you're able to get in touch with me, that'll be icing on the cake. But I know like you're essentially going to be on the clock 24 hours a day, so um, that will take priority over talking to me. But obviously, I'll want to hear some stuff.
Yeah, and if there's some random dude named Philip listening, and they're like, "Who the hell are these two dudes?" You know, I and what are they talking about? Well, I'm gonna go and be out on this 1,000-mile sled dog race's trail and help from within and with the coverage while Brendan holds it down here, over where he is at in Atlanta, and doing his best to cover the race, and has been following the race for years, and is a big fan of the sport, and is learning a lot, and wants to share what he's learned with you and continue to learn more. And so this is our first little installment of
the
the
Iditarod
Iditarod,
see this
basically.
is like Iditarod season for us from like a I don't know broadcasting or podcasting standpoint. So this will be the first of many, and whoever watches this one, stick around because this is literally the first time we've done this in a year, and I'm just getting used to this format and all the looks. Last year was just like, all right, let's throw it together. This year we've had a little more time, but this is like a little bit of a practice for us. So, anyways,
And look, we've never been accused of being real tight with our, schedule and plan of what we were going to talk about. And I think that its element will still be here. And I certainly with me around because I just have an idea pop in my head the second that this thing starts recording. I'm like, oh, dude, we forgot to mention that we should talk about the Iditarod Trail, as in like the history of the trail and that word Iditarod and the place Iditarod. That's something that. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about just kind of what is this race, and Brendan's kind of leading the way here. So
yeah, and I mean, with Sean out on the trail, I am my own boss. I don't have to like deal with the antics of Sean, you know. He's not going to just like throw me a curveball after we literally like figured out exactly what we're about to talk about and then like right into it. I'm going
well,
to
but
throw
I mean, do you know what the word Iditarod means? Do you know how old the trail is? Stuff like that.
Dude, let's go there. I mean, that's what this preview is about. So, we hadn't talked about that. I don't have any graphics prepared for that, but yeah, let's go ahead and let the viewer know what's on your mind here.
Uh, well, firstly, what is the Iditarod? It's 1,000-mile sled dog race across the entire state of Alaska. And it starts in, it's kind of the lower interior, south central Alaska, goes across the Alaska range where Denali is, and more interior hits the coast. And we'll get more into the map later. But the trail has been around 100+ years. It's been around since like the gold rush era, which was early first quarter of the 20th century. So um this trail has been around, and there was all these gold towns and businesses and villages that popped up as the Alaska gold rush happened. It started in the late 19th century. These towns pop up, supplies need to travel, people need to go places, mail needs to be delivered. There's different ways to get, but Iditarod was the name of the destination.
Alrighty,
Like the
folks.
Oregon Trail
Welcome
is
to the
named
Mushing.
because the trail led to get to Oregon, to get across the United States to Oregon. Right, with Iditarod, people were trying to get to the gold town of Iditarod, and some people would come up from the south of Alaska, um, and maybe kind of walk from the southern end of the trail to Iditarod, which is halfway down the southern route of the race. That's something we'll get into. There being northern and southern routes, but they would go up to Iditarod from the south, and then some people would go around the Aleutian chain via boat, get off and on the coast, usually in Nome, which is another gold town, and they would travel down the Iditarod Trail from the west and from the north down to Iditarod. And so those, and it was so it's like an intersection of trails where they all kind of meet together. There's other villages, other gold towns, there's other places that continue to pop up, and the trail continue to develop, right? And so this trail, we get to have the Iditarod because there's a trail. It's not that the trail is there just for the race. So it's because of this historical trail that we get to have the race. So it's when you're out on the trail, you're thinking like, dude, these guys were just like out here just walking along the trail. Maybe I don't know. It's something I'd like to read up a little bit more about, but that's kind of the gist of it. And so then, snow machines, snowmobiles were invented, and sled dogs have been a history of Alaska for 10,000+ years. But eventually, snowmobiles got invented, and sled dogs are a little bit more high maintenance. You gotta take care of them all summer long when the snow's melted, right? You got to feed them all year long. Whereas you could just buy a snowmobile pretty cheaply, put a tarp over it in the summer, and you get around almost as nicely, if not a little bit better in some cases, than a sled dog team. However, sled dogs excel at really, really cold temperatures, -40. They do great. Uh, Anything with an engine at -40 doesn't do very well. So in some ways, the sled dogs are still more reliable, but um, people shifted from a culture of mushing using snowmobiles, and the sled dogs were obsolete. And so part of the reason the Iditarod was started was so that we could have a reason to continue to celebrate these amazing animals that have been around for several millennia, and continue to have this amazing breed, and live the amazing lifestyle, and have these amazing dogs be intertwined with the Alaskan culture as they have been since the Ice Age. So they Joe Reddington, who's the father of the Iditarod, and many other people, had this huge effort over many years to make this race happen, which was a very challenging accomplishment. They pulled it off in the 70s, and this race has been going on almost every year since then. And you know, Iditarod is a native word, and it's named after that village that's the halfway point of the race for the southern route. It's a native word that means far and distant place. Because if you look at where, obviously Alaska in itself is far and distant, but when you look at the exact location of Iditarod, it's in a very swampy area. It's really, really cold there, more so than even, obviously Alaska's cold, but it's a really particularly cold zone. When I went there, it was -57 degrees, and then in the summertime, it's got all the swamps out there. So it's like billions of mosquitoes, right? So it's just a far and distant place that's hard to get to and difficult to be at. So that's why natives used that name, Iditarod. And we named the trail after its destination. And now the trail, it has a bunch of villages along the way. Some of them are old mining sites and everything in between. And we'll talk about the checkpoints and how that all works later. But I wanted to give just a quick introduction to what is the Iditarod.
I
Sorry,
love
Brennan.
it. I love it. No, I mean, I had I known you were going to go there, I might have had a little things prepared, but it's okay. Um, Dude, no, your depth of knowing what the Iditarod is and what it's about is great, and I think for the sake of this video, laying some foundation in terms of what it is that this race is all about is important. So, thank you for that. And really, I guess before we get into, I wanted to transition us into the pre-race logistics and setup. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything before we did that.
There's many more things to be added, but I'll at least just wanted to give a general kind of outline of what is the race. So many people, like 99% of the people in the United States are barely know like a lot about. There's just so much to learn about Alaska, and it's not a very like commonly studied place by mainstream anything, and let alone the specific sector of sled dogs and mushing. And so I just try to give at least a general outline, and we'd be happy to delve into that further maybe sometime into the future. But that, yeah, there's your history of the race and the trail, and yeah, we could go into friggin' 10,000 years of mushing, all that, and the genetics and stuff, but we'll just keep it simple.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Well, I say we transition into the pre-race logistics and setup. This is I created a little graphic to kind of keep us a little bit on topic, and so let's go ahead and do a little bit of chatting about some of these things here. So, um, the first thing we'll talk about is marking the trail, and you kind of just spoke a little bit about the trail in terms of the trail is there. There's history behind the trail, but there still is going in and marking it and putting the little sticks in the ground and stuff. So I want you to kind of speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, there's a firstly putting in the trail, uh all summer long, twigs and trees and everything are overgrowing onto the trail. So there's a bunch of just trail work to be done on that end. And sometimes even in the summer, people are going out to certain sections and they're doing like logging and getting trees off the trail and brush cutting and stuff. And we're talking like 1,000 miles of trail. They're not going that whole 1,000 miles. There's plenty of trail where that's just like not even a problem. But there's lots of places where you're getting whacked in the face by branches every few moments, and and sometimes it's just so they eventually they'll go and try to do it as best they can. But you're also going through the wilderness, so you're not gonna get yourself a 12-foot wide groomed trail. If you're gonna have to dodge some branches. That's just the nature of the beast. And then now the snow starts falling, the winter approaches, and all this snow needs to be driven on top of by something. And ideally, the best way to do it would be with a snowmobile. So people are out on the trail in certain sections. They do it in sections, man. There's like it's 1,000 miles of trail. There's lots of villages, and the people in the villages are contacting, in touch with the race a little bit, and keeping, they're traveling. Like if you live in like a random village on the trail, like Galena or whatever, and you like there's like a little school there, and they have a little basketball team or something. They'll get on a snowmobile and like drive on the Iditarod Trail to like Ruby, and then go and play basketball 50 miles down the Iditarod Trail. Right. So they're driving along this trail but there's certain sections that aren't super populated and no one's really traveling nowadays as much. And you need to get out there a number of times during the winter to pack down the snow. Right. These dogs can't, they can go off trail, but like a car, it's like a car. Like you can drive your car like on a field, you can drive your car like off the road sometimes and it probably still go, but other places you really don't want to drive your car off the road. Right. So with dog teams, like they can go places where there's no trail, but we're expecting a trail. It's laid out in advance of our departure, and it's hard packed. Sometimes some days it's softer than others, but it's marked, and it's the one trail out there. There's not a bunch of other trails. And so people drive along the trail without marking it there a few times. They'll just pack each time you drive a snow machine over the trail, it packs down the snow a little bit. Time and gravity compress the snow even more. And then you come back out a month later or a few weeks later, you do it again. More snow has fallen in that time. You pack it down and get a bigger base. So there's a lot of steps to it. And then kind of closer to right before the race, this trail breaking crew is going out with the snowmobiles. And I say snowmobiles because I know that a lot of people like that's what they associate. Like Alaska, they call it snow machines. I just don't want people to be confused. So yeah, they drive along the trail, and then they will put, the idea is they put a marker on the trail every 10th of a mile for 1,000 miles.
Hmm.
It's a lot. That's crazy. That's
10,000.
10,000 markers.
Yep.
And there's time, there's places where the trails are obvious and they might only have a marker every mile or half a mile. There's places where the markers get knocked over by the wind or covered by the snow, or someone runs them over. But there's places where there's a bunch of markers because they're like, hey, watch out. Coming up is some kind of part you need to pay attention, and they'll kind of put some signs. But the trail, you're not navigating. You're not like out there like with your GPS, like reading the stars and
That,
trying to guess like which way is west. Like
right.
you're on a trail that's like very clear and obvious 90% of the time. And sometimes it snows and blows and blizzards and you can't really see the trail as easily. Sometimes your dogs might even know where the trail is better than you do. But yeah, so they're going to go and mark the trail. Each marker has a reflective tape on it. So mushers travel day and night, light or dark, around the clock. And they shine their headlight on a head up onto the trail, and if a marker is a mile away, that headlight will pick it up. You'll see this little piece of reflector tape reflect back at you, and they're almost easier to find at night, I think, certainly than they are as the sun's rising or setting, or on even, yeah. So they're a little bit easier to see it at night, and So yeah, they've gone out on the trail and they've done all that by now, and they will be the trail breakers will embark down the trail the day of the start, or maybe the day before, and just stay like one day in front or half a day in front of the race, so that they can like drive it in front of the race as closely as possible without letting the race catch up to them. And they, if something changes, like as these conditions in Alaska are changing so much, they hopefully will see, oh look, this bit of trail, like a tree fell down, like let's get that out of the way. And unfortunately sometimes something happens between when the trail breaking crew is done and when the teams are coming through. Something might happen, like a tree comes down or a bridge collapses or whatever. And all these mushers and dog teams have seen these situations. They know what to do. They can get their way around it. It's just going to be a speed bump. And we'll see, just that's how much it's going to slow them down. That obstacle, it might be not a problem at all. But, if it's a real serious problem with the trail, they will send somebody out to kind of try to figure something out, maybe reroute something. But the reality is you're going to, as a musher and as the dog team, you guys are going to be able to solve the problem a lot quicker than whoever the race sends out to be coming out there 4, 5, 6 hours later, So that's the essentials of marking the trail and putting in the trail and breaking the trail for this race.
What the one question I was curious about as you were talking is any idea how long it takes them to actually put in all those markers for the whole entire trail? Is that like a couple?
Oof.
I would imagine that's a few weeks, or are they able? Is there some efficient way that they're able to do that faster than one might think? I feel
I would
like
think
that's
you could probably cover like 50 miles a day, and you could do more, you could do less, but I don't really know firsthand how many days it takes. But, you got to vroom ahead a tenth of a mile, put a stake down and kind of hammer it down. It takes more than just a second, just stick it in the snow. You want to have it like nice and firmly in there. And then you go down the trail a tenth of a mile and stop and do it again. I imagine it's a pretty slow, no pun intended, painstaking process.
yeah, that's something I want you to keep in the back of your mind as you're out there interacting with volunteers and I don't know, like you're gonna just have that some of these questions that I think of that aren't really related to the day ins and outs of the race. I'm curious about so that also might be a good question for your friend Alex. I know he's doing the trail sweeping again this year. Maybe he has an idea of how things work on the front end with putting the trail in and the time that it takes or what the team looks like. Is it they do it in a week, but they've got 20 people on machines doing it the whole time? Is it just like two or three
No,
people?
it's definitely like 3 or 4 machines. Maybe it's not the same machines and this. Maybe it's not the same machines and same people every time. But I have an idea of how it goes. Yeah, and they're going to be running those things that when the sun's up and maybe a little bit before or after the sun goes down. But yeah, they kind of do it. As my understanding is, yeah, in sections and in waves and um, but it's I think it probably changes a little bit every year too, just based on the conditions and the tasks that they have to do. But it's not like they don't have 20 machines out there, dude. It's like a small group with but coordinated attack.
Got you. Okay. All right, so I say we move on to the vet checks. And for any of you who have listened to our podcast in our last few episodes, Sean has kind of talked a little bit about the vet checks. But for the sake of what we're doing here with the preview of that Iditarod, I do think it's worth bringing back up. And um, you know, one question that I have for you, Sean, is I guess maybe with like the old school Yukon 1000, like how many other races are providing vet checks for the mushers and the dogs?
Yeah, every single race, pretty much. Any race that's a qualifier for the Iditarod is gonna have vet checks.
Oh,
There's
really?
like more recreational races, and even the recreational races still, you need to have a veterinarian there to be a sanctioned race by this the Iditarod Trail Committee. Um, so yeah, there might be a few smaller races around here, and but you know they're short and they're uh you know, there's
Not as
almost every
intricate.
race is going to have a vet somewhere and
Yeah.
vet checks. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I guess I just never realized that. The lead up to the Iditarod, especially on social media, you see a lot of those vet check pictures and, you know, statuses and posts and whatnot, but not necessarily for the other races. And I know that there are vets there, but I didn't realize that there still are vet checks. Like they're still required to see vets before the race. Is that
Yeah. So the way that vet checks work in the smaller races is typically, you show up to the race the day of or the day before, and the veterinarians, there's a team of, depending on the size of the race, it could be just like 4 veterinarians or something, or, it could be 12, whatever. But they go out around the parking lot where all the dog trucks are, and they just kind of stop by. Hey, we like, and you have paperwork. You got a binder you've hopefully prepared, and that's organized. And you can see the vet. So the vets, when I see them before a race, so I had like such amazing help at uh with people doing paperwork. It was obviously like not my strong suit, and they were like, "Wow!" Like when I gave them the binder, they were like, "Whoa!" Like this is the most organized. Everyone, a lot of mushers might just be giving them a big stack of papers that's all crumbled up and stuff. So but as long as you have the information, that's all that matters. And they give uh vet, yeah. So that's how they do the vet checks for the smaller races. Is just kind of right at the actual race start line when all the teams show up. With the Iditarod, it's they're still doing vet checks right now, like today, uh, and they're trying to get them all done as best they can. They sometimes, if you live super remote, they like you got to meet the vets halfway at least, But they'll go up to Fairbanks and knock out 4 teams and do it again, for 3 to 4 days in a row and get all the Fairbanks area, and then they'll come to Willow, and Willow's got a lot of dog teams, and probably stop by Talkeetna where there's a few dog teams, and Iditarod headquarters is where we did our vet checks. We drove down to Iditarod headquarters in Wasilla,
nice?
and the vets were waiting there. And so you can get up to 24 dogs for Iditarod, up to 24 dogs. You can get vet checks. You're paying $4,000 to be in the Iditarod, and this is one of the perks. You get to have 24 dogs get checked out. Most people, by the time the vet checks come around, there might be like down to like I think there's like 18 dogs I'm gonna pick my 16 from, but no one's like hardly anyone's like I got 24 dogs. Just really don't know which 16 I'm gonna pick. But you never know. A couple weeks before the race, something might change for you, and you have to. It's good to have those extra dogs that have been their tests have been passed, and if they come in the next year, that test from the previous year is now like recorded in the system. But every dog's required to get a complete physical exam, a blood chemistry exam, and an ECG. And so it takes a long time to just do one team. I think like it's a big deal if you can get 4 teams done as a veterinary team. If you can pull off get checking 4 teams in a day, it's like, and it's a blur. 24 times 4 is 96 dogs. So yeah, it's and you got every single one of those dogs has to, you got to kind of get them laid down on the table for the ECG and tell them, good boy, you're being a good boy, be quiet, be still, be a very good boy. And they're like, what are you doing right now? And I'm like, trust me, we just want to make sure your heart's healthy, and takes a minute, and then you give them a treat or pat on the head, and they're happy. And they have a healthy heart, and you can get them started in this race, and just know that they have no serious pre-existing conditions, and it won't be a liability um, out there. So yeah, they have to pass all these tests.
Right on. Good job with the vet checks. Another thing that we've talked about over the last few episodes are the drop bags, and you know, you can feel free to go down as much of the rabbit hole or not as you want to, but in short, each musher is allowed to prepare a drop bag up to 50 pounds. It can be dog food, equipment, food for the humans, equipment for the humans. And, there are 20 some odd checkpoints along the way. So 20 times 50, and some people are doing more than one drop bag at each checkpoint. So that the drop bags were due about 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. And I know, Sean, you've been a part of that several times. I can vividly remember being on the phone with you and hearing the saw in the background, and you're just like, dude, I feel like I've been cutting meat for like 17 hours straight.
It's funny that I like. It's funny how the difficult times are. Those memories don't last as long as the good times, and it was very rewarding, of course. But the Vaughn and I think behind all this, all these things we're talking about, behind everything on this list, pretty much is an insane group of volunteers. And I don't know if we have that as like a thing we're talking about later,
We
but
do.
the
We do.
veterinarians
I mean, we
are
could go there
all,
now. It's fine.
yeah, well, let's just say for to finish up the veterinarian thing, there's like 35 or 45 veterinarians, depending on the year. They're all volunteering their time. Some of them live in Alaska, but a lot of them come up from the lower 48. Like they pay for their own flights to come up here and do this thing. And why? Because they get to work on these incredible dogs. It's a new kind of sector of, learning for a lot of vets that are maybe doing it for the first time. And it's also like for the ones that are coming back, like it's cool to see these dogs like in their prime, and you're kind of handling a little bit of different vet care than you might be doing on a day-to-day basis at any vet clinic in any city anywhere. You're dealing with just a completely different group of dogs and pets. And so, um, but yeah, my point is like they don't have to be up here. They're not getting paid. They're getting like a free T-shirt and a flight out to the checkpoint and meals and stuff. But yeah, they're coming up here and flying back just to be able to have this amazing experience. And it's like this race would be put on without the veterinarians. And now this brings us to the next group of volunteers that Brennan asked about was the drop bags. So there's an Iditarod Air Force that flies out these drop bags to each of the 20 checkpoints. And, there's a few checkpoints that are not resupply points.
Which
But for the most part, there's like 20 something checks. 22, I think, is the number. And 19 resupply points are out of those 22. And they fly out these drop bags, which is about 2,000, maybe as little as 1,500, sometimes as much as like 2,300 pounds per team to each of these checkpoints. And so it's a big day or two of flying, getting and flying this stuff all the way out there. You've prepared. These dogs are eating on average about 10 to 12,000 calories a day during the race. So you need to get a bunch of meat. What are they eating? They're eating meat. They're eating kibble. They fats and oils and nutritional supplements and homeopathic remedies. And you're sending, extra. You're sending booties out there. Sending dog coats and blankets. Where you're taking a 24, you're sending extra food, extra gloves, extra everything. And you don't really know exactly where you're going to be taking your 24-hour rest. So you might send extra gear to multiple checkpoints, and there's a strategy there to be had. And it's 63 cents per pound that's flown out there. So you pay 4,000 for the be able to be in the Iditarod, which includes getting the trail marked and veterinarians checking your 24 dogs and being out there at each individual checkpoint. There will be at least one veterinarian to take your drop dogs and care for them before they fly it back home. Um, but yeah, the preparation for drop bags, they're almost always every musher is going to have at least a couple of drop bags per checkpoint, up to 50 pounds. I think for me, it's like filling up the bag, 50 pounds. It's like keeping bag. It's probably nicer to just keep it at 35 pounds and be more manageable. You want to label each bag is labeled, says Underwood, Rainy Pass, bag 1 of 3. You would do your best to spray paint some pink neon stuff on there so it's easy to find your bag when it's dark and you're tired. And that stuff will be, you're sending out frozen stuff, and guess what? Alaska is frozen this time of year, so you don't have to worry about your stuff going bad. People send out like their home cooked meals that are vacuum sealed and frozen, and they can just have mama's homemade chili out on the trail. And so that's kind of the
Careful though.
gist
Careful on the back end,
of
man.
drop bags.
Jeez.
What?
Chili, man. I don't know that. I don't know if that's race approved.
It's a good dude. Chili's a good one,
Yeah.
man. It's like it's easy to thaw out. You just like cut the corner off of the vacuum seal, and you can just squeeze it down into your mouth, and it's like,
Whoa.
it's just eat. And if dude, you've had some good chili. There's such a thing as bad chili.
I
But like
mean, I'm just
the
thinking
chili
of
I'm
like
thinking of and the chili
chili
you're
with
thinking
like
of,
beans in
they're
it,
must be
and
different.
like you guys aren't showering during the race. There is no access to a shower anywhere, right? Not even
I
like
don't think
at a
so. I didn't get any
24 like
access to one.
McGrath or something or anything.
There might be, but I never saw one.
Yeah.
Not until the finish.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about chili and beans and no showers. I don't know. Seems like a recipe that
I mean, dude,
might
what
need
are
to
you
be
gonna eat
avoided.
them? Have just like, you know, yeah. I think you don't want to take like nutritional like risks or like dietary like, ooh, I don't typically eat sashimi, but I'm thinking maybe I'll send out a bunch of raw tuna for me to eat out on the trail, this year. It's like, don't experiment with your diet during the Iditarod. Just eat what you've been eating all winter. And if it's
Yeah.
chili, then send out chili, you know. And if it's pizza, then send out some pizza.
And just to reel this back in real quick, so Sean was talking about the Iditarod Air Force. So that's there's about a team of 30 pilots, and they average about 1,000 to 1,500 hours of flight during the Iditarod. So that was like a little fun fact that I wanted to bring up while Sean was on that topic. I also, you mentioned the vets. There's like 35 to 40 vets per, and then while we're just talking about volunteers as well, usually it's about 1,500 to 2,000 volunteers that travel worldwide to volunteer for the Iditarod. And the one thing I wanted to mention about that is just that like the race is pretty difficult to pull off without this force of
Impossible.
right. So we definitely just, like Sean and I were talking about this beforehand, like we want to make sure we talk about some of the people that maybe we don't talk about a lot or don't even get thought of because we're focusing on the docs and the mushers. But these people are all behind the scenes making it happen. So the least we can do is give them a little bit of respect and talk about them here during the prep.
The drop bag pictures are kind of cool, like because people are always dropping off their drop bags in the same few days, and I mean, literally, you're sending out like, I don't know, probably 60 plus bags, 2,000 pounds. It's like you're putting it in a warehouse. They all got to kind of get put in an organized space and be ready for being shipped. And so there's just like all kinds of people there moving drop bags around, and it was cool to see that whole scene. So yeah, this race would be impossible without volunteers. I think if there's like one thing that comes from us doing what we're doing is like hopefully more listeners means to more people helping in whatever way is possible. We're not necessarily directly volunteering, but hopefully people are like, oh, like how could I help this race? Like I don't have a $5,000 to give the race or give a musher. Why don't I like give him my time? And maybe that's a cool way for you to go come up and experience a last kill, or maybe you can just help from home answering the phones or um, you know, uh helping with designs or whatever. There's always room for volunteers, and the sooner that you hit up the Iditarod and curious about it, you know, the better you're gonna get at something that fits your skill set and what you're trying to do. But it's a cool way to help with the race. And there's all kinds of, and then there's not just the race, there's then all the mushers, and they all have a village behind them. Every single one, I promise you. No one's just completely alone doing this. Um, they might be alone for some of the year doing some things, but yeah, it just takes a total village, not just from the race itself, but from kind of all these different aspects, like the mushers and the kennel, and who's like at the kennel while the musher's gone and taking care of the dogs and keeping the other dogs moving and running, and who's going to pick up your dropped dog, something we'll talk about later, when they get flown back to Anchorage. And so there's just so much community and so much volunteering of time, whether you're an official Iditarod volunteer or not.
Right. And I also wanted to, while we're on the subject of volunteers, take a quick moment to do a shout out to a listener that is a volunteer. Shout out to Wendy. She mentioned she's going to be out on the trail. She's like, "How am I going to be able to listen to you guys?" So, just thought I'd give that shout out while we're talking about that. But for the sake of time, I would like for us to move on. And you've talked about straw and fuel. Let's kind of keep this one short. But what's on your mind related to those two things?
Yeah, like the dogs are always going to get bedded down with straw. They're like, "How? Where do the dogs sleep? They just sleep in the snow." It's like maybe on a hot day. Sometimes when it's 30 degrees and the sun's out, you might lay down straw for the dogs and they lay in the snow. But yeah, there's a bale of straw at every checkpoint, and even on some of those like hospitality checkpoints where there's not resupplies, they still have a bale at some of those. Like I think Finger Lake would be a good example. Um, and so there's a bale for every team at every checkpoint, and then there's like an essentially an unlimited amount. Like I never like used so much fuel that, and they were like, "Sean, like take it easy, dude. Like you're gonna kill all our fuel." Like they have a ton of fuel, and by fuel, it's this product called Heat, HEET. That's liquid methanol, and you pour it into every musher has a cooker, and they're all a little different, but the idea is that you have a big pot with like some holes drilled into it, kind of like a burn barrel might have. So it's like a mini burn barrel, and you just fill the pot like an inch of this liquid methanol and light it. And then you put a slightly smaller pot inside of the larger pot, and then you've kind of just created a burner to melt snow or heat up water that then you can add to your dog's meal, add kibble to, you add water to your kibble and your meat and make a big brothy soupy meal sometimes. Well, you're gonna make it all the time while you're out there. So you need this fuel, and it's also you heat up that water, and that's how you make your meals too. And get yourself some water, and it's nice to have a hot drink. And so, yeah, there's fuel for everybody, pretty much unlimited at every checkpoint.
Right on, man. Right on. Let's see. We just had a question that came in from Kat. She was curious about how do the mushers find their handlers at the different checkpoints? And it's a good question because the Iditarod is not like your traditional other races. A lot of other races have handlers. And I mean, you'll have your handlers there at the start, right? They send you off. But outside of that, um, you're not really going to see your handlers much along the way. But I know, Sean, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, you're not going to see your handlers at any point during the race except for the start and the finish. So you are the handler. The musher's the handler. You get to the checkpoint. Who's waiting for you? There's a checking official that's like kind of gonna. You got to sign in and say, "Hey, I'm Sean. This is my signature." They write down the time. They say, "Hey, food's over. Drop bags are over here to the left. There's a water with hot. There's a barrel with hot water over there. The lodge is up there. They're making, they have hot food in there if you want. Straws to the left, and you know, fuels to the right. Or maybe they have a hole in the lake that they drilled, and that's where you're getting your water from. A hole in the ice. And then you're on your own. It's just you and your dogs, and you go and grab all the stuff you need. Do your dog chores, which is a whole nother, you know, thing as what you're doing at that checkpoint routine. Um, so you know, but essentially, yeah, you're, taking the booties off the dogs, laying down bed for the straw, making them food, giving them some massages, um, and getting them to sleep, and getting yourself fed, get yourself to sleep, and repack the sled and prepare to get kind of leave it ready for you to be taking off after you wake up from your 40-minute nap or whatever. So yeah, no handlers. That's what it's yeah, this is celebrating like your ability to be self, sustained. You shouldn't need any help from anyone. You got all this stuff out there for you to succeed in this.
Well, I'll just say thank you, Kat, for the question, and just anyone who's watching, whether it's live or coming back and watching this after the fact. During the Iditarod, we'll have a schedule. It'll be announced, and we encourage you to come watch with us live and interact. And if you do have questions, I can certainly try my best to answer them or pitch those questions to whichever guests we have on. So, yeah, anyone who's watching, feel free to ask questions as the event is going, and maybe there's more viewers. There's no guarantees that we're going to get to all of those, but part of why we're doing this live is for that interactive piece. So, thank you, Kat, for asking that, and anyone else watching, feel free to ask at any point. The last thing I wanted to bring up in the pre-race logistics and setup topic area was, and this is a little bit of everything, so hopefully we don't lose you for a half an hour on this one. But there's a lot to consider with the dog setup, and like I'm thinking of the logistics of getting the dogs from wherever you are training to Anchorage. And, that looks a little bit different for someone who lives in Alaska versus someone who's in the lower 48 versus someone who is living international. So, yeah, let's talk about that for a sec, Sean.
Yeah. Well, if you're living in the United States or Canada, you're driving there. It could be, I mean, you're driving 2 hours, or it could mean that you're driving 40 hours. If you're coming from Minnesota or whatever, or maybe that's like 60 hours. I don't remember how many hour the drive is, but it's long and takes many days. And you just drive. The dog trucks are typically a big truck of some kind, and people have these dog boxes that are made of plywood, and they're about the same size as the house that they uh, live in all year, and so they're very kind of comfortable in there. And the dogs, you should see, like, when you pull at any kennel I've ever been to, anytime that they pull up the dog truck into the dog yard, all the dogs explode with excitement because they associate the dog truck with going on some epic adventure. And so they love the dog truck. You like let them off of their tether, and they go sprinting to the dog truck, climb right into their bed if they can reach it, or they wait for you to, lift them up and put them in if it's a higher spot. So that's how they love their dog trucks. And obviously when you put puppies in there for the first time, they're kind of like, what is this? I'm not so sure. And then they figure it out after a couple trips. But um yeah, and then flying with dogs. I mean, anyone that's flown with a dog, it's a real pain in the ass. But these dogs are, like I said, they're very well traveled. Obviously, every dog has to travel for the first time at some point. But yeah, set them up for success. I know that Mats Peterson was explaining how you can fly, I think, 4 dogs per person is what it used to be. Maybe now it's down to 2. I'm not sure. But yeah, so he would just kind of find a bunch of friends, like, hey, here's your 4 dogs. He'll put them in a kennel, and get them all set up, send them out off, and so it's a huge thing to do, and it is a real not only hurdle of logistics but a financial hurdle as well to be able to travel with your dogs on a plane from overseas. So uh, that's why you don't see as many international mushers coming here, just because it's such a financial and time commitment. And there's races that are usually they're coming from some mushing community where there's races, but the Iditarod is considered to be one of the, if arguably the premier 1,000-mile event, long distance, in long distance mushing in the world. So people people do it nonetheless. But that's why you haven't seen someone like Thomas Werner, who won the 2020 Iditarod and lives in Norway, come back yet, because it's freaking hard to get over here, and you can't blame him.
And he's probably scarred from the aftermath, like I forget how long he was in Alaska, but he won and then he was kind of stuck in Alaska for a while, so I'm sure once he got home he was like, I don't know if I'm thinking twice before I do that again. um so yeah, that was a little bit of some of like the pre-race stuff, and I'm sure there's other things. If you all have questions, feel free to put them in there. The next thing though that we wanted to talk about was the rules, and we have quite a few rules here on the list. We're not necessarily going to like get into the nitty gritty on all of these, but some of these were interesting to uh, for us to go through and look at together. And anytime there was like a conversation that you and I were having, it was like, maybe we should just put this on the list and kind of like quickly bring it up or whatever. So yeah, Sean, let's start off with.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, I can kind of tear through these. So mandatory rest. There's only 3 mandatory rests. One of them is the 24-hour rest. You can take anywhere you want, but there's really just like 5 checkpoints that they're typically taken at, and they're in the middle, like right at the end of the first third of the race. So they're usually somewhere between like 200 and 500 miles in, and uh, you have to take 1 8-hour rest. That's you're going to take after your 24, but before the coast. It's usually on the Yukon River, or maybe in some of the checkpoints right before the Yukon. Um, and then there's the 8-hour rest in White Mountain, which is the final checkpoint, and it's the last kind of stop before the most challenging run of the Iditarod, which is the final 72-mile run to the finish. And so those are your 3 mandatory rests. They make up about 1/4 of the total rest that a competitive team will take in this race. So people often ask, do you have to stop? And then I almost never mention this when I'm talking about sled dogs to anyone, because they think that that's the only rest. No, you're only running like 50 to 60 miles at a time. You can do it any way you want, but this is what works. It's 50 to 60 miles at a time, running 9 miles an hour, plus or minus. Could be 10, could be 8, whatever. Stop for 4 or 5 hours, then run again, 50, 60 miles, 6 or so hours, stop for 4 or 5 hours. And you just wash, rinse, repeat day and night, light or dark, around the clock. And if you can keep that going without any hiccups, you can be, competitive in this race. But yeah, that's how the rest works. And you can take the rest that's mandatory has to be at a checkpoint, but all the rest of your rest you can take anywhere you want. You're actually technically not allowed to camp like within 1 mile of a checkpoint. But besides that, you can camp anywhere you want on the trail. And a lot of people prefer to camp on the trail because it's quieter. You're not distracted by the other mushers and other dog teams, because sometimes you get to the checkpoint and you're trying to get your team to sleep while the team next to you is getting real excited because they're about to leave. And they're excited to go get out running again. Mandatory gear. You're sending out.
Here's
Go ahead.
As a former not former, as an Iditarod vet, there are 10 mandatory items. How many of them can you get?
Oh shit. All right. Well, I don't know how. So we got a sled. You have to have a sled. Does that count as one? That's just too obvious.
No, that doesn't count as one.
Fine. All right, you got obviously an axe. You gotta have an axe,
Yep.
just in case there is a down tree on the trail, or you gotta fend off a angry moose or something. Um, you gotta have be able to. You gotta have booties. That's not on there. Wait, how? What is this? How long is this list of 10 things?
I'll just hit it real quick so we don't like get lost in it. So, proper cold
Oh,
weather
okay. Let
sleeping.
me let me. All right, fine.
I mean, get to it then, dude.
Well, you said you're looking at sit here looking at the friggin' thing
Dude,
for.
I don't have them memorized. I'm not a vet. You're
Oh, I
talking
thought you
about
just have it up.
a
What are you looking
proper
at?
sleeping bag. It's got to be a minimum of 5 pounds. Proper cold weather. You got to have the axe. You got to have an operational pair of snowshoes with bindings. Each snowshoe has to be a certain size. Any promotional material provided by the Iditarod Trail Committee. 8 booties for each dog in the sled or in use. One operational cooker and pot capable of boiling at least 3 gallons of water at one time. Veterinarian notebook. Adequate amount of fuel to bring 3 gallons of water to a boil. Functional non-chafing harness for each dog and team and functional neckline, and an insulated dog coat for each dog.
I was gonna fully crush that list. Just want listeners to know. But anyways,
We
uh,
don't doubt that. We don't doubt that.
yeah, and then so there's your mandatory gear. The snowshoes are like one of those things that like nowadays almost no one will ever use. Some people have figured out creative ways to use it, but the reality is, you know, you just stomp around in the snow if you're in deep snow. That's my experience, but it's good to have survival gear out there, man. You never know what's gonna happen. What if COVID-2 hits and you know everybody starts dying out there and you're stuck with your dog team? It's probably good to have some snowshoes. Maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. So bib. So there's starting positions. You tomorrow night they're gonna draw numbers out of a hat. You pick where you're gonna start. They start in 2 minute intervals. So bib number one is actually like an honorary musher, and then bib number two is like the first musher, and then that first musher leaves like if this starts at 10 a.m. or let's say it's 2 p.m. on Sunday. So at 2 p.m. the honorary musher leaves at 2:02, and the honorary musher is just like it was Lance Mackey last year, RIP or whoever it is, and then 2:02 uh is the bib number two. They leave, so they're first out on the trail, and then 2:04 is bib number three, and so on, and all the way down to bib 38. And they bib 38 is leaving 76 minutes after bib two, or 74 minutes after bib two. So they make up that time differential during wherever you take your 24. So if you left first, you got to wait 74 extra minutes at your 24-hour rest. So when you see bib numbers, that's their starting position, and that's what identifies the musher. If instead of having to, some people have a really difficult name to remember, so you're just musher number three, then they can figure out who it is later. And so it's just a way to identify the musher. You wear that at the start line, you wear it at the finish line, but it's hard to wear a bib for 10 days over your parka. That sometimes you have your wear parka on, sometimes you have a less gear on because it's warm, and the bib has to switch from one to the other. It's just like you just wear it when you're kind of back from the wilderness and back in public, So you at the finish line and at the start line is when you're typically wearing it.
And that was the one thing. That's kind of why we wrote that. What led me to wanting to talk about the bib is that I would have just assumed that you're wearing the bib the whole time, and but just going through the rules, I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that you just got to wear it at the start and the finish essentially, and I went as far as just doing a quick little search. I did rod search mushers, and all of a sudden I noticed that unless it's like the ceremonial start or the restart or gnome, there aren't any bibs on. But so that's just something that I don't know. I just assume that you guys are wearing them the whole time. And then let's talk about the sled, Sean. And I know that
You have
there are different styles of sleds. There's big ones, there's long ones, there's whatever. But just like a general idea of the sleds.
you they have to be able to carry a injured or fatigued dog, and they can't be self-propelled. Those are the only rules. And so I think some year somebody tried to have like a sail, to use the wind to go faster. So stuff like that you can't do. But um, yeah, it's people have light sleds and people have finishing sleds. They can switch out your sled. You can send one substitute sled to some of the like more the checkpoint hubs, that are easier to fly to. You could like McGrath or Unilocleat. They have like a proper runways, and you can fly out sleds to some of those checkpoints and switch them out. So oftentimes people start with the big heavy sled, kind of helps slow. You have 16 dogs, you're kind of overpowered. Sometimes it's hard to stop if you have like a really light sled setup. So and then especially if you're someone that likes to camp out in between the checkpoints and get those quiet camp out sessions, you're going to want to have maybe a little extra room because you got to carry the straw and carry your food and have a little extra room out on the sled. So it's part of the strategy, and it's up to the musher's discretion. And you see all kinds of unique sled setups, and you also see there's probably about 4 sled makers, sled dog systems and dog paddle sleds and Dandler sleds, and so they kind of all have a similar like 4 brands of sleds, but there's also people like Lev Schwartz makes his own sled and out of carbon fiber stuff, and people make their sleds a lot. It's really common to make sleds out of old hockey sticks, which are also made out of carbon fiber, and it's really sturdy and it's light, and you can, so a lot of people do that as well.
Right on, man. Good stuff.
And runner plastic also. You have the like the plastic on the bottom. Like when you're snowboarding, you could wax it every week or two. Every time you do about 3 or 4 miles of snowboarding, it's like these guys are going 100 plus miles a day on the runner, so they're not going to wax them, but they get scratched up and scuffed up, and they'll switch them out. So that's some of the stuff they'll send. They're very easy to switch out. They're kind of like a dovetail fitting. They slide out, slide in, and there's a certain plastics for certain conditions. If it's fluffier, softer trail, you might have a wider plastic, and it's there's plastics that are better for warmer temperatures and colder temperatures.
Nice, nice. Yeah, we've gone down that rabbit hole. Like certain colors mean certain things, and you put certain colors on of plastic for the runners in certain conditions and such. Next up, we'll talk about the dog max and min, and that was actually a rule that was modified for this year. Last year was you started with 14 dogs. That was the max you could start with, and this year is put back to 16. So I know that there's different opinions on that, but I think that for those who are more like traditionalists to the race, I think they were happy to see that it's back up to 16. And the other note of that is the minimum allowed to, come across the finish line is 5. So you have to have 5 on the tow line at the finish line. Is there something else you wanted to add to that, Sean?
I guess not really. I think that kind of covers it.
Alrighty then. So let's move on to the driverless team. And last year everyone was like making a big deal about Eddie falling off and getting help, and feel like it's worth talking about. So Sean, what do you want to talk about there?
Yeah, my understanding is it's anytime a driver falls off of the sled, it's never a good thing. Even if your team's going faster, without the driver, like they might go, they can't really slow down, so they might get like stuck going really fast, and then you can have like dogs get sore and They you know where they're gonna go. There's only one trail out there, and they want to be on the trail because once you leave the trail, get you just can't go anywhere because it's usually pretty deep snow. So the rule is, it since it's never an advantage to get separated from your team, you can get reunited with your team by any means necessary. So you could literally get a snow machine ride, whatever, any means necessary. Just get yourself back with your team and get those dogs safe. Because yeah, some bad things can happen if there's no one driving the sled. It's usually fine. It's usually, but yeah, it's never a good thing. And yeah, if you somehow gain a competitive advantage, then I'm sure the race would say, hey, we're gonna not dock you a couple hours off your time or something. But it's like,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
go faster because you're not like on your sled, like that means your dogs are just gonna end up having sore shoulders and wrists and stuff because you're going 15 miles an hour or 12 miles an hour. They're gonna be gassed, and so you're gonna have to stop anyways. So it's really just never an advantage to lose your team. It's not, and so just get reunited with them anyways. And necessary. The race is about the dogs. Just get the team back. You know, Yeah, a lot
yeah,
of times people fall off because they fall asleep, or this trail is really gnarly and they get knocked off the sled. When the when they fall asleep, oftentimes the team can be separated from the driver for hours because you fall asleep on flat, straight trails that are boring and mundane, and so they just kind of keep marching up the trail and they kind of laugh at you as they leave you in the dust. And when you do it on a technical trail, there's usually winding and twisting and uphills and downhills, and usually the sled tips over and wraps around a tree. You're probably gonna maybe break your sled or something, but it's usually the dogs get caught with the sled gets caught with something, and you kind of walk a mile and you'll see your team. So,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, and just to add to that, the driver may recover their team either on foot with assistance from another musher or a mechanized vehicle and continue the race. Motorized assistance must be reported to an official at the next checkpoint. If mechanized help is used and advantage has been gained, the race marshal may impose appropriate sanctions. So, just to kind of
nice.
add a little cherry on top to what you said there, Sean. The next thing I want to bring up, which I thought was really interesting, and that is the rule of passing. And I'm looking through this with you, Sean, and I was just like, wait, what? You have to stop and move over and let the person pass? I'm like, surely not all the mushers are doing that, especially ones that are trying to win or concerned about with where they're finishing. But yeah, please elaborate on that one, man.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, it's always best for both teams to have the faster team in front. Faster team can just go ahead and they get what they want, and the slower team now sees this team in front of them, and oftentimes that can be the little spark to get them kind of at least moving a little bit faster for a little while. So it's always to everyone's advantage, and it's just like they don't want that tomfoolery of like, oh, I'm blocking the trail and too bad. I know you're faster, but I'm not getting out of the way. It's just like you pull over your team if you need to pull them over, or sometimes the trail is plenty wide enough. It's like a highway, or it's like driving your car. It's a lot of there's some comparisons to be had. If you're driving through a mountain road up in North Georgia, Brendan, and you really got to, and you're driving behind a slow car, you got to pick and choose. Hopefully that car kind of pulls over when there's a pull out, and you pass by and they pull back into the road. If you're
Just
on the
or you just
285 and there's
cross over doubles and just sorry, I'm passing you, but that's
yeah,
maybe I've
and
done
you're
that,
on a
maybe
six
I've
lane
not done
highway.
that. I don't know.
If you're on a 6 lane highway, you just pass around the team, and that's that. But even then, like, you at least slow down a little bit when you're on one of the wider trails. So yeah, let the people behind you passing. There's no man's land at the last run, but it's like almost never a factor. Like, there's been one race, 52 years, that was 1 second between first and second place. But every other race, no man's land's barely, if at all, a factor. Even the second closest race was 2 minutes. Like, it's still 2 minutes. It's not like you can see each other and they're close, but it's not like you're next to each other, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, no man's land is like there just in case, but it's like
Right. So essentially, just to add to that, like that passing rule where you stop and let someone go is applicable for the entire race until no man's land. No man's land is at Fort Davis. Fort Davis will show it to you on the map. It's kind of like the a little bit before you get to the actual city of Nome. So that's like the only place where you can just like, all right, let's send it and try to go toe to toe. That would be awesome if there was actually. Could you imagine like if I don't know, we've had some close races this season. You know, imagine if one of those was like in a wide open space where everyone's just trying to book it. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, let's move on to the outside assistance. You know, I don't think there's too much to mention here. You've kind of hinted at it. The Iditarod is a race where, you know, you're focusing on the musher being able to do all these things by themselves with their dogs and for their dogs. And so there's no outside assistance. And I guess in years past, they've allowed for mushers to request a wake up call, but this year, in person wake up calls for mushers are not permitted. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that on the outside assistance piece, Sean.
yeah, you just can't. You can have help, but the help has to be something that would have been readily available by to anyone else. So like mushers can help each other out in some kind of bad trail situation because if that were to happen to some other mushers, they could have they'll and they could have that same opportunity to help each other out somewhere else. You can eat food at the checkpoints that the food's available for all the mushers. You know, maybe the people in the back of the pack have slightly crappier food selection, but you know, they can still there. And but yeah, you know, you can't be showing up to Galena and be like, yeah, my buddy Fred lives there. He said he's gonna hook me up with a new pair of boots, dry boots that I can put on. You know, you can't be doing that kind of stuff. And yeah, when it comes to setting your own alarm, I've done the wake up call thing. It's pretty sweet to go to bed and just know that there's someone there that's awake that's gonna shake you awake. But you also don't like trust it. Like it leaves a lot of room for some debauchery. Like what if like the musher's like super delirious and they like you wake them up and then the musher's like mad at you or whatever because they're just so sleep deprived and they don't know what's going on, you know? And then, you know, they come to you a little bit later and they're like, why didn't you wake me up? They're like, we did. Like you just like don't remember or you ask a volunteer to wake you up and they're also sleep deprived, the volunteer, and then they blow it and they don't wake you up. So it's just like, why don't you just be your problem? And I think that's actually a cool addition to the rule because you know it just leaves a lot of like gray area when you have the wake up calls and it's like, all right, if it's up to you, it's up to you. You got to have your alarm clock, and that's a whole other thing. Like trying to electronics like run out of batteries and like that's gonna be kind of a thing. You know, I wore a watch, but it's like I wore a little $20 watch and that, but it has a really soft alarm sound that I sleep right through. Okay, and then I got my phone, but my phone dies pretty easily when it's -30. All right, then you get like one of those little crappy like alarm clocks from 2002, and those things, you know, maybe don't do that well. So it's like gotta try to figure out how you're gonna do that. But all these mushers have their systems figured out.
Yeah. Good work there, sir. You knocked off a couple of our bullet points that I wanted to bring up. This next one, though, I'm super interested in talking about, and I'm curious if you are familiar with a story behind it. But the killing of game animals along the route. So, in the event that an edible big game animal like a moose, caribou, buffalo is killed in defense of life or property, the musher must gut the animal and report the incident to a race official at the next checkpoint. Following teams must help gut the animal when possible. No teams may pass until the animal has been gutted and the musher killing the animal has proceeded. That's pretty freaking awesome. Like, uh, here you are in the middle of this 1,000 mile ridiculous race, right? And then, should the need to kill an animal come across, now you've got to stop the race and gut the thing. And if anyone catches up, they're not passing you either. Like, oh man. Do you have a story, or has there ever been a time where that's been the case?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. All these rules are here for not out of thin air. I know that Susan Butcher. That's what stopped her from her fifth Iditarod win. What would have been a fifth win is I think a team of bison attacked her team, and some dogs got seriously injured or killed. Actually, it just happens. It's very unlikely. It's super unlikely, but it can happen. And animals are out there in the winter, like surviving in winter is hard, and they're grumpy. And dog teams are predators to them, and sometimes they get territorial. I think there's a story of Matt Failer having to defend his team from a moose a year or two ago, and down to moose. Um, that was attacking his team. So yeah, it certainly can happen. It's very rare, and but you got to put it in there just in case, kind of like no man's land. And it's cool, interesting. Like if you were to roll up on that situation, that you're like required to help. You know, it's already part of the Alaskan spirit that you would pull over and help, but it's cool that they put that on there. Like, yeah, dude, get off the sled, go help out real quick, and then let's get this thing on down the road.
So I want to kind of try to wrap up these last four, and I want to talk about the competitiveness piece of things. So that's just kind of talking about where, if someone's fallen too far back of the pack, that they have the right to, uh, you know, withdraw that or disqualify that person. I'm curious your thoughts on this rule, and just, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has to be a rule. You can't be out here writing memoirs and be like, hold on, I'm not finished with chapter 3 yet. Like, dude, get up and get off your ass and go get on the trail. This is a race. It's not a vacation. Even though it is a little bit of a vacation for some people, it's a unique vacation. Some people are out there and they're doctors and they take their vacation days to go and do this. Um, but there's volunteers and race officials and veterinarians and all kinds of people that have to stay out there for 3 extra days after already having been out there for 10 days. They got like lives and jobs and families to get back to. Like they're not gonna keep people out here because somebody's taking their sweet ass time. Having said that, it leaves a lot of room for gray area. What is competitiveness? How many hours behind? Oh, but what if the conditions are actually looking up and the trail's fast? You could easily catch up. And there's just like there can be some really tough decisions that I've had close friends get withdrawn. With healthy teams, and they were just trying to be taking that extra bit of rest, and they maybe just took a little bit too much rest, and then they got stuck in really soft trail conditions, and next thing you know, you're 36 hours behind the race, and people are trying to go home. So it's just it's a really tough conversation that I don't envy the race marshal having to make.
Yeah. All right. And so you kind of hit on the dog tags earlier when we're doing the vet checks, but kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, they all have microchips, so that you can't like be accused of like substituting in a dog that he's like, it looks like Buddy, right? That's Buddy. You're like, no, that doesn't look like him. That's not the same dog you started with. It's like, well, just scan the microchip, right? And then dogs, dog tags, they are also identifying to each team, not to each dog, but what the dog, uh, every team, every dog on the team has the same dog tag for that specific team.
Got you. Okay. So essentially, that just
It's you can yeah,
that
you can
just helps
imagine it's
with the
confusing at a
identification,
checkpoint. Yeah,
right?
you get like
Or
8
if there's a
drop
drop dog,
dogs.
or yeah,
They're
yeah, yeah.
flying home, and you gotta like so it's any way you can identify dogs and not have some kind of mistake made in getting them home. Yeah,
Sure. And then the last thing on here is the hauling of dogs.
and return dogs. I mean, these are yeah. I mean, I wanted to talk about during dog maximum and minimum, so I hope it's like somebody. I'm scared somebody was watching then, and then they paused it, and they were like, "Wait, what do you mean max and minimum? How do you start with 16 and end with 5?" You can send any dog home at any checkpoint for any reason. It's to the musher's discretion. And of course, the veterinarians, if they see something that they're like, look, that dog is not uh, we're not gonna let that dog continue down the trail because we, maybe the musher missed something or whatever. The vets have the right to make that call, but you can also, as a musher, just be like, yo, this dog is kind of pissing me off. He's been like peeing all over my shit, and I just don't want to deal with him. He's like, when I take the booties off, he's growling at me. It's like, dude, just you can just send that dog home for that. It'd be good enough reason. Broken nail, sore shoulder, their harness rubs on your armpit and you have a little rash. Like it doesn't take much to not be able to keep up with the team that's going 100 plus miles a day. So I use fill out the paperwork at the checkpoint, hand the vet your dog. They've got food and a bed for the dog to hang out and get. If they need hydration, they'll give them an IV, whatever it is, and get them the right care until they get flown home, and then you have somebody from your kennel or friend or whatever that's there to pick up your dog and bring them back to their home whenever they get to Anchorage. And you can, if you have an injured or fatigued dog, sometimes you got to carry them in your sled. Things happen. It's a 60-mile run in between checkpoints or even longer in some cases. And so sometimes they step in like a little soft spot on the trail and they've got a little limp going or something. And you're like, I think I should just get this dog a rest. We don't want this injury to get worse than it is, or soreness or whatever. And so you get them in the sled and they kind of curl up in there and take a nap, ideally. Sometimes they do get injured, but they're still like super stoked and excited. And they're like, you get them in the sled and they're like, dude, what are you doing putting me in the sled? Like, I'm good. And that's happens with people too. Like I'll get injured and then I'll keep playing because
Right.
I'm in denial that I'm injured. And so that's what dogs do that sometimes. And so it's good to have a good setup in there and have a game plan as to how to haul a dog. And sometimes people actually will haul a healthy dog just to give them a break. And this has kind of been a little controversial in the mushing community because some people are like purists and they're like, dude, you can't be like carrying dogs to like give them rest. But there's nothing to get. I think it's fine. I think, you know, it's you have to stop your team to get the dog off the team, put him in the sled, then take the dog out of this that was resting in the sled and put him back on your team. It's like a whole thing. It takes a while. It's like kind of a pain in the ass. Seems like kind of inconvenient to me. But if you think that it's going to get you there a little bit faster, then go for it. And that has worked in the past. CVs have done it. Other people have experimented with it. So you are allowed to do that with a healthy dog. You can start with a healthy dog in your sled, but it's hard to do. You got to get your dogs trained up. You got to get a kind of a roomier sled with more places for your dogs.
Hey, Sean, we got another question that just came in, and they were curious about any idea what percentage of mushers carry a firearm?
Yeah, I don't know how many mushers carry one, but certainly a good chunk. I would say somewhere like half, maybe. Um, yeah, I got a couple friends. Yeah, they always will have a firearm. I think there's a good argument to have one. Absolutely. I mean, try to kill a moose with a knife or an axe. Good luck. It's been done, but it ain't easy. Even trying to kill a moose with a gun is not easy. It's like it's pretty. It's like not an easy shot. There's a lot of fur and a lot of animal. So, uh, and then you got your gun. It's like, where are you gonna put it? Like underneath all your layers. Now you got like a gun all the way in your way. Like probably not gonna put it there. Let's put it in your sled bag. But do you want it to be like right, like on the outside of your bag? And now what if you clip a tree? You know, okay, let's put it on the inside of the bag. You put it on the inside. It's like, all right, now we run into a moose. I'm like, oh shit, like a moose is on my team. I need to go and like get my gun. You're like digging through your sled, trying to find the gun. You get the gun. You're like, oh, I can't even shoot this thing with my gloves on. Take your gloves off, touch the metal. Metal's really cold, and then you got freezer burned your hand. And, I just don't imagine it going like super smoothly. But if you have like the right gun and the right system and like the right experience, I think that's great. And, you know, I think that even if you have the gun, it's not like, oh, problem solved. Like moose hit your team. Like, it's a good thing I have a gun. Like, I'm going to crush this situation. Like it's still a pretty messed up scenario with or without a gun. And sometimes I'd say more often than not, the gun would be helpful to have in a situation where your team is getting attacked. But you really gonna have to. It's tricky. I guess my point. And that's why not everyone has one.
Yep. Well, I think that's a good question though, and that's a good answer to the question too. So that wraps up our little rules that we were kind of interested in talking about. We do want to also talk a little bit about the route, and so let's have a little fun here for a minute. Do some movement here. All right.
Dude, it's so sick.
Coming in hot over here. And I'll mention it here. We're not just ripping off the Iditarod's website. We are supplemental to the Iditarod's website. So, um, you know, I can. I'm not going to. I could take their GPS tracker and put on here, but we've never really wanted to be like the competition or anything like that. We've just wanted to be an additional source of information for people who are, content thirsty during this race. And so, as much as I'd like to just use theirs, I'm respecting what they've got going on. Sean's going to be working with the Iditarod Insider too, and it's just like out of respect, I think it's better that we do something like this. And so I've gone to Google Earth and kind of put out the route and mapped the 22 checkpoints. There's a couple of those are all the yellow spots that you see. There's a couple spots that are white, like Shell Lake, the Burn, just a couple other small areas like that. Earlier we were talking about Fort Davis. So this is where no man's land is. So Fort Davis is literally the last little stretch here to Nome where you can it's open season. That'd be awesome, man. If there ever is a really close finish, they got to have some cameras set up somewhere in this stretch, get into Nome. But
Oh yeah, dude, for sure. There's a road that goes along there, and there's snow machines all over Nome. Yeah, it would be well documented.
nice. So yeah, I mean, we're not going to talk about all the different checkpoints and whatnot, but I guess one thing that I wanted to just quickly show you. So the red line that you see is the route for the northern route that they're taking this year. And let's see, if I just click this, that green is the difference of checkpoints in the route from last year on the odd years. So let's see, I think if I just do this. So yeah, we're missing out on Iditarod, Shagalook, Anvik, Grayling, Eagle Island, but then it comes back here to Caltag, and instead we go Ophir to Cripple, Ruby, Galena, Nulato, and then back to Caltag. So that is kind of compares both of those. I don't know if you have anything you want to add there too, Sean.
There's so much more that we're going to be talking about. We got a lot of days ahead of us here. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been on this little part one intro to the Iditarod 2024 Iditarod for an hour and a half already, and we're just kind of scratching into the route. One thing that I'll say is as Sean's out there on the trail, I will definitely be asking our guests to kind of more vividly talk about the section of the trail that we're at during that part of the race. So um, we'll certainly kind of make sure that we provide a little more information there. But just in general, is there anything that you want to mention about the trail or uh, let's see the two that you've run in 20 you would have done
this
this
route,
route,
northern route,
right?
and in
And
2021 I went to out and back from Iditarod back to Willow.
right. So so you're familiar with this northern route. I mean, you did a pretty healthy chunk of it. And I guess let me just ask the question this way. What are some things that stood out to you in this route?
I mean, that route, the only difference is that section that you just showed. So the run goes from Ophir is like the last common checkpoint, and then you get to Ophir, and when you leave Ophir, there's just like a left and a right turn. It's like the only time there's a left and a right turn. But the Ophir is like an old mining camp, and there's not much there, so it's not like the trail from Ophir down to Iditarod is put in this year. It's only put in for the race because no one lives in Iditarod. It's a ghost town, and Ophir, no one lives there either. Anyways, turning right to Ruby and Ruby to Galena to Nulato. Those runs on the river are like sneaky hard. I think it's like in theory, it's just you're on the river and it's fast. I mean, for me, the run from Ruby to Galena was like really, really hard because it snowed a lot and then it got really hot and it was really soft trail and the trail was kind of hidden and we didn't know if we were on it and it got really slow, like 4 or 5 miles an hour. So, some stuff, those kind of conditions on the trail, it could be that the people are going 10 and a half, 11 miles an hour on that section of trail. And it could be blowing upriver, as we say in the floating community, upstream dub is not a good thing. You don't like that upstream wind. Wind is W, dub, wind,
Upstream
upstream
dub.
dub.
I like it.
Upstream dub is not a good thing. Um, but yeah, so the Yukon River it's the mighty Yukon, man. They got jumble ice is a condition you'll see on these rivers. And then you have that nice long run from uh, Cripple to Ruby. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it's not necessarily like the most challenging section of trail, uh, the northern, that part. But it can be. Any section can be really, really, really difficult. And just my specific year, it was from Ruby to Galena that was really hard. But this year it could be another section. It just kind of depends how the trail sets up. And it's looking like that. I think you probably wanted to talk about weather. That's going to be a huge variable as to how the race goes. Is weather is everything.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I think we should wrap it up. I know we looked at I know I asked you to look at some of the weather and just kind of briefly talk about that. We don't really need to forecast too far out, but
Yeah.
just in general, like how is the start of the race looking?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that like this week is going to be nice and cold in a lot of the trail. Like I saw -30 in Nikolai this week, and it's low, and that's just like like when I went to Nikolai, it said it was going to be a low -30, and it was -55. So like sometimes with those lows, it's like some place like oftentimes they're kind of misleading, and they can be a lot colder. And then uh, so that's good though because it's been really warm here. We've had a nice like 3 days in a row that have been like nice and cold, and like in the minus temperatures in the interior Alaska all week. And this is really good because I'm sure there's a lot of water overflow, maybe holes in the ice, and having a bunch of cold nights in a row is going to help a lot with uh, firming up the trail. And it is supposed to get warmer, I think, as it's supposed to be a nice day, like on Sunday for the restart. But yeah, it is supposed to get a little bit warmer, I think, into next week. But look, you got to just, when it comes to the forecasts, like I really have a pretty strict, like, it's nice to have an idea of like what it looks like in 4 days, and like it's generally going to get cold or it's generally going to get warm. But like 24 hours into the future is pretty accurate. But like as you start to get farther and farther into the future, it's like, all right, things are going to change. And even just like from when I last looked at the forecast 2 days ago to now, it's changed. So you take it. The takeaway is it's been nice and cold this week. Things are hardening up. It'll probably get warmer as the race progresses, but it's not going to be like, hopefully it doesn't get into like above freezing temperatures. And by warm, I mean when it gets into the 20s. That's like pretty warm, and you certainly got to adjust your strategy for these temperatures.
Nice. Well, I think we've done some good work for this first round, this part one. On Friday, we are going to do a part two preview. We're going to be focusing on the mushers. We're going to kind of hear Sean talk about what he knows about them. I want to also talk about, some predictions. And then we definitely got to make sure we cover the fantasy mushing as well. We encourage you all to join our group.
Yeah, good call.
And kind of walk you through that on Friday on the website. I don't know if somehow there's a sponsor that wants to jump on. We're a completely unsponsored, but I was thinking maybe like we could get a sponsor to like have a better prize to whoever joins the Fantasy Mushing League. Then I mean, listen, my guy, this shirt back here,
We got those silly shirts.
It's top of the line quality over here. But
We'll get there. We'll get some swag for you eventually, but that's what we have for now. And if you want the shirt, we'll give it to you. And if you don't, we'll give you
probably still give it to you.
A hug. Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed this. This is, like I said, this is kind of just like the rough draft of things, and as I get into the flow of things, this is gonna get even better. We'll have like a ticker down at the bottom. There's no need for a ticker today, but there is a lot more to come. We hope you all enjoy. Thank you for following. Hopefully you're subscribing. I'm not going to say that too much, but we appreciate the support and the love. And until next time.